It's a brand new era. We are now able to take corporations that used to make decisions, take that business logic, put it on the blockchain, and have the blockchain operate in a trustworthy fashion, in an auditable fashion, in a fashion where they cannot misbehave. So this is pretty nice. The promise here is to be able to automate businesses and eliminate middlemen. We talked about this at great length. To achieve far higher efficiencies. We could build, for example, a hedge fund with 0% overhead. All of the decisions are done programmatically. The system can be made self-policing or self-arbitrating. You can't maybe eliminate the legal system, but you might be able to handle many of the simple cases. So these are great. And you can bring complete transparency to the operation of a company or trust in insurance, in finance, and so on and so forth. I mean, the simplest example is Luba has a company and she says 10% of her proceeds go to charity. Do they? How do you know? Right? I always read these things, and as a Turk, I'm bred to be skeptical, so it just feels like, that thing is complete bogus. It often is bogus. But now it doesn't have to be. You can actually provably do amazing things with this. So there are lots of killer apps that will happen. So this was the promise that Ethereum sold to the world. They said, well, look, we're going to give you Turing complete programmability. You're going to be able to build arbitrary DAOs. And after Ethereum went live, we had maybe about 6 months where everybody built a Ponzi. Okay? So the very first applications of Ethereum were Ponzi's. They were provable Ponzi's. And provable Ponzi's actually are a great thing, as you well know. If you jump in early, you make a lot of money, right? And so people, had fun with those and so forth. And along came the very first real Ethereum application. It was called the DAO. And the DAO was an interesting experiment. And deep down, underlying this DAO episode, is this big question. Is it actually possible to build secure, functional, smart contracts? Does this technology, or can this technology be made to work? And so right here I have some fine print, and then this little thing over here is saying, well, what about the fine print you see on regular contracts, right? So I know how to write Solidity code, and I look at what I normally sign when I enter into a proper contract. How do we handle can we write Solidity code that's as expressive, as thorough, as comprehensive as regular legal contracts? And so what's in this fine print that we often don't really read carefully, but we should? Well, things like how to form the contract covenant, what the covenant actually is, the spirit of the agreement, how to resolve disputes, how to modify the contract, how to terminate. So these are really complicated issues, and it turns out that in the DAO episode, just about all of them were violated and confused. Okay, so what happened with the DAO? So about, I guess it's been 2.5 years now. So 2.5 years ago, a group from Europe came up with this concept that they called the DAO. So they usurped the name the DAO, which was a really confusing thing to do. And the contract they built was essentially an investment fund. It's kind of like Kickstarter, kind of like Andreessen Horowitz. Okay, so and in fact it came about in a very funny way. There was a company called Slockit, and Slockit, they wanted to build a smart lock, okay, for your bike, and so that way you'd be able to put these things on bikes, you'd be able to undo the lock remotely over the blockchain, you'd be able to bike share and da-da-da-da. Well, this is a simple idea. They figured they needed a few $1 million for it, and so to fund the smart lock idea, they decided to build the DAO itself being this funding vehicle. So how is it supposed to work? Well, at a very high level, it's supposed to work kind of like this. So the DAO is created, and it's like a fund. We all buy into the DAO, okay? So we all put our money in. And the DAO now has its own funds. So contractors come before the DAO. So Luba says, hey guys, I have a great idea. I need $10,000. I'm going to print t-shirts and I'm going to sell them. And then we have about a week or two, she sets the time out, and we hem and haw. We're like, Luba, is she trustworthy? Has she sold T-shirts or whatever? And is she good for the money? And then we all vote. We vote in proportion to how much we bought into the DAO with. And then if we decide we like the proposal, we fund the proposal. So Luba gets $10,000. She prints the T-shirts presumably, and she comes back in a few weeks and pays back. That's sort of the core idea. And and when she comes back, the money goes back into the big pot. It gets distributed to the participants of the DAO. Does this sound like a simple idea? Who said no? Okay, Zvi, come on. I was hoping that you'd set me up. It sounds kind of simple, but the moment you think about it for 1 microsecond, which clearly everybody in this room is doing when Zvi is ahead of everyone, it's incredibly complicated. There is nothing simple about this idea, right? Because there will be all sorts of corner cases, all sorts of things that we have to worry about. What I want to do...
I can explain my answer.
Sure.
If I want to fund some specific project, I can just give money to that specific project. I don't need the middleman, the DAO.
No. That's not that I disagree with entirely. A lot of things that happen in business are about rendezvous, are about ways in which people come together. I would never know that like person X wants to go and do task T. In fact, you can do some amazing things with the DAO. So, for example, a normal fund, like Andreessen Horowitz, has headquarters in California. They have actual people in charge. They are subject to American law. And so they can only do those things that they're allowed to do. With the DAO, once the DAO starts working, Luba could come by and she could be like, guys, I have this great idea. I'm going to build a submarine for transporting drugs from Colombia to Florida. And now we go hem and haw, and we go, we didn't know this about her, but she's a submarine expert. And if we are going to get 5% cut from each shipment, I'm in, right? And who's going to stop me? It's unstoppable. It literally is unstoppable. So you can do funny things with this, and it has that rendezvous element that is only possible that's specifically possible on the blockchain. Rendezvous of pseudonymous entities. That's pretty nice. So I want to tell you how the DAO worked, how these people wrote the code, and how it turned into a ginormous disaster. I'm not going to focus on the actual hack too much, because that's not very interesting. I'm going to focus on everything else about the DAO. So, and hopefully we'll have a discussion about how to build a better DAO. That's what I want to have today. Okay, so it's a smart contract. What that means is an object. It has entry points, and it has some code and so forth. So about, I don't know, there are maybe 15 or 20 methods, but they relate to these 5 functions. One of the most important ones is buying into the DAO. Then there's the voting phase. There's the exit phase. And then there's the modifying the contract part, which doesn't exist. And then there's the payout phase. Okay, so they skip this one. So let me tell you how this thing was meant to work. Okay, so it's an object. It gets created, and because of various securities laws, nobody knows who created the DAO. Okay, we know who wrote the code for the DAO. We don't know who actually created it on the Ethereum blockchain. But once created, it has this 27-day accumulation, or what they call it, the creation phase. It accumulates money during that phase. During that phase, all you can do is you put your money in. And so this happened in April of 2.5 years ago, 2016, I guess. And so that's what it is. And they have this kind of a bizarre feature, which is kind of interesting. You buy in, and you pay 1 Ether for 100 DAO tokens. So you put 1 ETH, you get 100 DAO for the first 14 days. But after that, it becomes more expensive. You have to have, for every other day, you have to put in 105 Ether. On day 11, you have to put 105. On day 12, you have to put 1.1, and so on and so forth. So it goes up, and then the last 3 days, it becomes really expensive. So what's going on here? They're playing into your FOMO, your fear of missing out, right? Come in quick, early, when it's cheap, it's going to get expensive later on. Okay, so this is very much a marketing trick. Already makes you feel a little weird. there are a whole bunch of sort of complications. It really is just an object. It has this extra balance field. So there's a field that accumulates the extra money that collects in here. So all of these additional funds over here, that goes to a special area called extra balance. Okay? So there's the kitty that it accumulates plus the balance field. So, questions of this kind, of course, abound, which is why is there a rising scale? Why are they doing this FOMO thing? Do you need viral features in a sound investment scheme? What's going on? So that should be a red flag. Next thing. So once the first 27 days are up, then the object becomes actionable. Okay? And what are the actions? Well, one of the main things that can happen is someone can submit a proposal. When a proposal comes before the DAO, it is not immediately voted on. There is a human element that weeds them out. So they have they selected 11 people, and 5 out of 11. If 5 out of 11 of these people select a particular proposal, then that proposal becomes voted. Yeah.
What exactly is the proposal? Just a plain text in English? Or
no, a contract.
A smart contract.
A smart contract itself.
Separate entity. Separate
entity, and it has a payment scheme that is outlined in it.
And a document.
And a corresponding document that you can read. So we never really explored that portion of the space too much because of what happened immediately, right?
There were a few.
There were some. I'll talk about them. Okay, so they have this human element. This is kind of a weird design feature. So a lot of people 11 people were named in it. One of them immediately said, I want to have nothing to do with this. This is dangerous because it creates legal liability. So is the job of a curator to check just the identity of who the proposer is, or is it to protect the DAO? Is it to look at? It certainly is not to examine the business proposition. The job of the business, the people who are supposed to look at the business proposition are the DAO token holders. So exact job description for this was not clear. After the hack, it became even more messy, and we never got a real crisp statement anywhere. The curators are not paid, but they took substantial legal risk. Okay, so once a proposal has been submitted, the curators have approved it, now it floats in the air and it's open for voting for some period of time. Any DAO token holder can vote on a proposal. Okay? And the proposal is funded if there is a quorum, that is, if there is a sufficient number of people voting. Okay? And the majority voted yes. So what is sufficient number of votes? Well, that depends on the amount. So if the proposal is asking for a small percentage of the DAO's funds, then we don't have to have a large component of the DAO voting. But if Luba comes in and says, I want 100% of the DAO's funds, then the required quorum size was 53% of the DAO token holders. Okay, so there's a sliding scale. There's some kind of a function. The more money you want, the more people should vote. And here the idea, this is actually not a bad one. I think people who do e-democracy and so forth know that most people are passive free riders. It's like, I put my money into this vehicle because I don't want to make hard decisions. I want to go with the crowd, whatever the crowd thinks. So we're not going to have 100% of the DAO token holders actually voting. Right? These are not informed voters. The largest required was 53%. These numbers, of course, are coming out of somebody's gut. They are not based on any research or anything else of the kind. They just made these up. Votes are weighted by a voter's DAO token holdings. So if Maurice has 10% of the DAO tokens, he votes. He has 10%. He votes with 10% of the tokens. And I come in and I vote with 5%, etc., etc. The quorum is 20%, so that now he owns half of that quorum, right? Okay, so the more money you have, the more representation you have, the more voice you have, in essence. Okay, now, so this is crucial. When you are part of the DAO, and you are making decisions on what to vote and stuff, you, in essence, are directing other people's money. So Morris, voting with his 10%, can reward 100% of the DAO to Luba. That's totally okay. So if he ends up, essentially you're directing someone else's funds. You're directing the DAO itself. And so that's an interesting thing that's happening. If you were just putting in your money, that would be a different deal perhaps. But you're really actually managing the collective good. And there are all kinds of conflicts of interest, et cetera, that are really hard to resolve. And I hope maybe we'll have a fun discussion about how this should have been done or would have been done if you did it. Now, you want people to have some skin in the game. What you don't want is somebody who doesn't have any sort of anything to lose, voting left and right? So we couldn't possibly have, for example, somebody come in with a large amount of money, vote for a dumbass idea, and then exit, right? They will bankrupt us. We can't have that happen. So people are agreeing with me, or are people, we're running out of oxygen in the room, you're getting sleepy? Okay, don't get sleepy yet. So the DAO people, they wanted to get rid of this problem, and the easiest thing they did was to say, look, if you vote on any proposal, then you have to bear through with the results of that vote.
Even if you voted no?
Even if you voted no. You touch this, you're part of it. Especially if you voted no. Because there could be a conflicting DAO, right? There could be an alternative, a competitor DAO. So you don't want these guys coming in, making us make bad decisions, going back and voting yes on those.
Yeah, but then somebody has a proposal, you don't like it at all. Everybody voted yes except you, so you can say screw you guys and vote no.
Yeah, exactly. If you vote no, it's actually, yeah. So I have a whole slide on this. We're going to get there. So you can immediately see that this is a problem, but I don't know of any good solution that isn't a problem. Yes?
But you sell your share to someone after you voted, so the buyer has to bear in your actions, right? So they wouldn't buy.
Let me talk about, good question. So there are a bunch of things you can do. You are worried about, so let me talk about the exit, okay? So suppose I don't like where this whole thing is going and I want to exit, okay? So it turns out that taking money out of the DAO is incredibly complicated. It's literally a 62-step process, okay? You issue a gazillion method invocations to the DAO to get your money out. And this is going to be somewhat important to the hack, so I want to go through some of it with you. So what do they want to avoid? They don't want money coming in and out of an investment vehicle too quickly. Okay, so they want to slow it down. So they came up with the following idea. We have the DAO, we're all part of it. Now I want out. So what I do, according to the DAO implementation, is I say, hey guys, I would like to be the curator. I have a proposal that we all replace the 11 curators that we already have with just me. That's a stupid proposal. So you guys are going to say no to that one. That proposal will most definitely fail. When a proposal to change the curator fails, then I can say, I'm going to create a child DAO because you guys don't want me and I want to exit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a baby DAO, a child DAO, where I am indeed the curator, and I'm going to step into that one. I'm going to transfer my money from the mother DAO, the main DAO, to the child. Okay? So, and I do that by calling this function called split DAO. So I was part of the big collective. I tried to become the sole owner of it. You guys don't like my idea to become the sole owner, so you voted no to that. Then I call split DAO, and I now am trying to become I then do become the curator of the child DAO. Now the child DAO has 27 days to collect money. Okay, so now my money is tied up. There's nothing I can do, and I'll twiddle my thumbs for 27 days. Then I come before my own DAO with a proposal to take all my money out. And I vote yes on it with 100% of the votes because I'm the sole person in the child. And then that gets approved. The minimum voting period is 1 week. So an extra week goes by, to vote on the child DAO's take money out proposal. And at the end of that, I take all the money out. I'm done. The child DAO is now can be cleaned up. You can see how long this takes, right? I think there is something else here that I'm missing. I wrote this like this. It's at least 34 days, but I think there's another 7-day waiting period because of something I missed. It is literally a 62-step process. You had a question. Yes, absolutely. Yes, they wanted to make this hard. Yes. Ah, good. Okay, we'll get to that. So, good. You guys are good. So, I'm going to not respond to what you said, and I'll come back to it in like 3 or 4 slides. So, things can happen there. Yeah.
What if people accept you as the sole curator of the big DAO? Does that mean you can never leave them?
No, then you become the sole curator of the big DAO, which is maybe not the world's best thing to be. Yeah, that.
It seems you have to put yourself in that risk in order to leave.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really bizarre, right? It just makes no sense.
Did that ever happen?
No, it didn't. It didn't. I mean, this thing like lasted, I don't know, like less than 10 days. So yeah.
All these steps require you to pay fees for doing that.
Yeah, of course. But they were low back then. 2.5 years ago, these were like less than a cent. So yeah.
You could also just sell your DAO holdings, like token.
Okay, yeah, that was what you were pointing out. You could sell your DAO token holdings. That's right. That's right.
Instead of going through this whole process, you could just
pass it on to someone who wants them. So there is an aftermarket this is for taking the money out, the exit. But you could transfer the money using an external party. You just at an exchange. So that's actually an interesting issue, right? So we have now a very well-established exchange ecosystem. They exist. And so you have to design knowing that those things are going to be there. And so for the longest time, the DAO, the Slockit folks were very confused about the price of their tokens at exchanges and the price for which they are redeemable. And yeah, there's arbitrage opportunities there. So it was very confusing to them. They couldn't account for why people would value risk. Yeah, anyway, so that's a different side conversation to have. Let me move forward a little bit because we'll get to fun stuff. Okay, so here is like a you hear this like, you know, the shark circling the waters music. How do you upgrade the DAO, right? You know this is code. We know we've all written code. It's always buggy. And, you know, bugs come from this infinite supply. What provisions do they have to modify the DAO? Absolutely none. Okay, so that was easy. There's no kill switch, no security upgrades. You cannot preserve the state and change the code. So this is an enormous mistake, of course, because if there's an error or bug of some kind and you want to patch it, well, you can't. Now, in their defense, they would say, well, look, we want this thing to be unmolested. We don't want a court order coming to us and saying, change the DAO in this fashion. Make sure that submarines are not funded. Right? So they want to have none of that. But then they went so, like the pendulum swung in that other direction so far that now we can't change anything at all. The DAO is what it is, and if it ever screws up, then we're kind of out of luck. Okay. And then there are a couple of rewards and so forth. So I mentioned the extra balances field. So that's where you collect the extra bonus. It's kind of like your Christmas bonus fund. There's some limitations on when this could be spent. If the extra balances has $1 million in it, you can only touch them after you've spent $1 million of the DAO's money. There is this thing called the rewards function. So I am not in full command of this. I spent a lot of time looking at it. Rewards is the field where, remember when Luba took money out and so she started paying back? Her payback go into the rewards area, the rewards field. And it's distributed from there. This is kind of like dividends, okay? And I'll talk about how it's managed, and it's such a mess, as I can just tell you right now. Okay, so we talked about the token markets. Okay, so why was this crazy thing designed the way it was? Well, it was designed to avoid legal meddling to some extent, to help fund maybe illegal things. I mean, there is really some element of this within the design of the DAO. And it's just completely sort of sunny day thinking. Anytime you talk to these guys, they're very nice people, very, very bright, but they would always tell you, well, this is what we want to have happen. And you would be like, I know. It's like, that's the easy case, right? It's like you talk to a 3-year-old, why are you doing this? And they'll be like, because I want X. Yeah, you want X, but let's kind of explore every other path that leads to not X, right? There are many of them that you left on there. So this is just mostly aspirational system design. And I want to have a conversation with you, and I want to lay on the table all the issues that we identified that question the entire idea of the DAO. It's not even clear to me that this can be made to work at all. Okay, so let's ask a couple of hard questions. One, are the crowds even able to pick winning strategies? Is this idea a good one at all? Right? Can we replace Andreessen Horowitz with the DAO? Is it the case that fund managers, all these people at whatever, VC funds and so forth, is it the case that they bring zero value to the world? And I don't know the answer to this. The answer might very well be yes, they bring zero value. It's kind of interesting. I've thought quite a bit about this. The crowds know best what the crowds like. But they don't necessarily know what's technically possible. They're not technical experts. So if your question is, I have an idea, would the crowds like it? Then the crowds are very good at telling you what they would like, right? That's the one thing that they're an expert on. In every other aspect, I think they're just a bunch of morons, really, in any technical issue. There's another question about, will we ever reach the quorums required? What are the quorum sizes that are required? What should they be? And given the fact that most token holders are passive, how do you actually take the passive people into account? People bought into the DAO because they want to free ride. It's just like, I don't want to think. I don't want my ether sitting in my hands. I want it to go into good projects based on what you all think are good projects. But if I'm doing this strategy and you all are doing this strategy, then there is really nobody leading us. The number of leaders might actually be very, very small, and suddenly we have a very gullible organization in our hands. So, and the real question is, are the mechanisms in the DAO, which were fairly straightforward, like this is the kind of thing that if I tasked an undergrad with, write something like a fund, this is the kind of thing he'd write or she'd write. Are the mechanisms in the DAO suited for the tasks that need to be carried out? And the answer to that last question is a giant resounding no. And I'm not saying this after the fact, knowing that the DAO failed. I was saying this before the fact. So what happened was I was in Ithaca at Cornell, and Vlad Zamfir, one of the Ethereum developers, was with me, and we were hanging out working on something. And it was April, and the DAO had just been unleashed. And he said, and he was made a curator. And he's like, hey, Gun, I was made a curator. This is kind of a weird thing. And then he was like, a couple days later, he was like, this thing is collecting a bunch of money. It's kind of odd. And but we thought this thing would make maybe a few $1 million, and then use it to fund the smart lock, and then everything would be fine. And then suddenly this thing ended up having $100 million in it. And Vlad was like, "Good, this is like crazy." And I was like, "Yeah, this is easy money, right? This thing is just a sitting duck. It's very manipulable. It's a very gullible kind of an operation. It's very easy to mislead it." And so at some point, so it was like 11 million ether. So that was, what is 11 million ether now? It's $1.1 billion in today's terms. Yeah, I think that's how much it was. Yeah, at the time it was 220 million USD. So that's a bunch of money. And so it's around, it's around 150 mark or so. Vlad and I sat down and I was like, look, this is a systemic risk to Ethereum. We need to understand what this thing is implementing. So we poured over the code to understand whether or not it had any vulnerabilities. And then we wrote a manuscript that initially identified 6 problems with the DAO. And the funny thing is, time is passing. That 27-day period is ticking away. So on day 24, I felt like, okay, we have to make this public so the Ethereum folks can discuss this and maybe unwind the DAO or do something about it. So we put on Google Documents this doc that was titled a call for a moratorium on the DAO, and it identified 6 different things in it. It, of course, went viral. None of my papers have seen this kind of popularity. So in Google Docs, if somebody is looking at your document, they get like an anonymous name, so like anonymous artwork, beaver, camel, etc. So I had this like enormous set of animals up there, and we were editing the text in real time because we're fighting against the robot, right? The robot is this 27-day thing. It's going to start taking decisions. We have to go before everybody and say, hey guys, don't put money into this. We need a moratorium. So ultimately, we ended up identifying 9 different bugs in the DAO. And then I was in DC one morning, and then suddenly I got this phone call saying, hey, Gun, you have to wake up. Something crazy is going on. And something crazy was going on. Somebody was emptying out the DAO. And we were in a Skype channel with Vitalik. Vitalik was going crazy, and he started spamming his own chain. So he wanted to slow down whatever the heck is happening. We have no idea what was happening. All we can see is the balance is constantly dropping, and so he started spamming Ethereum to try to slow down the leak. The hacker ended up taking out $53 million or so. Okay? So then he stopped, and he put all of that into a child DAO called the Dark DAO, and in doing so, he took advantage of the reentrancy bug that Morris mentioned. Was it you? It was you, yeah? That Morris mentioned 2 days ago. So we're going to look at that in a second. He also used one of the bugs that we found, which is exactly the topic that you mentioned, which is following the split DAOs, the children, and stalking various people. So he ended up doing a stalking attack coupled with a reentrancy bug. So it was a pretty cute sort of episode. Everyone felt like, oh my God, this guy is just, or whoever this person is, he's stealing the money. He's pursuing everybody who wants to split from the DAO. There is no safe place to hide. We are so getting owned by this. So the funny thing is, I came very close to identifying where the bug was before the bug took place. It was by then it was June. And I had a summer cold. It was absolutely horrible. So I was in bed. I was looking at this code. My eyes were tearing, and I was really unhappy. And so if you look at the line numbers, I think this is line number 666 right here, and this is 667, and this is the offending part. And I think Morris had this is literally the code. Morris had the simplified version of the code. All this code says, is somebody wants to split, and so let's figure out how many of the dividends they take with them. Let's figure out how much money that we Ether in addition. So this is the dividends. This is his own shares. How much of that we need to pay out. So this is all just essentially idempotent code. You come in, and it just calculates your portion. So figure out his portion, and then call this function that will transfer the money to that person. And after that's done, go and update the balances, right? So this is the critical part. So total supply goes down after the withdrawal is completed. Balances are updated to 0 after this line. Paid out is set to 0 after this line. That's the bug, right? Because if you do it this way, clearly, withdraw reward for will call a function outside of the DAO's control, and that function can come back in, go through, transfer the Ether out, come back in, go through, transfer the Ether out repeatedly until it runs out of gas. So it has to do it just the right number of times, and then it unwinds, and then it happily sets the total supply down. But who cares? It's gotten the money out, and at that point, somebody with a small number of tokens can get a large amount of money out of the DAO. So this was the situation. Oh yeah, I did identify this before it happened, but I was sick. So I wrote it to one of our bright PhD students, and I said, hey Phil, I think this is buggy. And he was like, no, again, it's not really exploitable, blah, blah, blah. Like this, you can do this, but that code can't do that, blah, blah. He said some stuff. And I was too tired, and I said, okay, like you have a lot of, if you do any security checking at all, you have a bunch of false positives. I was like, okay, I guess I was a false positive. Turned out Phil was a false negative. And anyway, so this came back to bite me, and then people got really upset at me. They were like, oh, he knew where it was, and he didn't tell us, and da-da-da-da. It was absolutely horrible. And for a while, they thought I was the DAO hacker and so forth. But no, that was really bad. I got this call from the FBI, and it was like they left a voicemail message, and it's like this really like a very American-sounding voice, like, "Hello, this is Agent Mulder from the FBI. Would you please talk?" And so I listened to this, and I was like, "Okay, yeah, of course they want to talk to me, because I have interesting things to say about the DAO." And I'm walking home, and then suddenly I get this red flash. Like, they don't want to talk to me because I have interesting things to say. They want to talk to me because I'm a person of interest. They're going to come and take me to jail. And I ended up talking to 3 FBI officers and 2 attorney generals about this. I tried to get them to look at the issue more deeply. Nobody has brought any charges, and the DAO hacker remains unknown. But yeah.
Why will they allow to move money into child DAO without the collateral voting not making him the collateral?
Changing the curator vote is not up to curator approval. If you make that up to curator approval, then curators will form a cartel. So for anything you say, I have like a locally reasonable answer, right? But globally, it's all screwed up. So.
But there was a vote that so he was nominating himself as curator and got no, and then he did?
Yeah, he had a child DAO. That's right. That's right. He had a split DAO. He had his own DAO called the Dark DAO, and that's where he got the money out to. Yeah. And you can't keep him from splitting. You don't know who he is in the first place. He creates it, right? And the curators have no say in a change curator vote, as well they shouldn't. Yeah.
Do we know if he liquidated his asset afterwards?
Yeah, he did. I'll talk about what happened. What ended up happening is Ethereum reverted this entire operation, and he ended up selling his ETC, Ethereum Classic. So on occasion, I think he ended up taking a few $1 million out, I believe. So, yeah.
In a sense, in Ethereum, it seems to me like code is contract, right?
Code is law. Say it proper. Code is law.
Sorry.
Yeah, code is law, man. This is what they tell you. Yeah, code is law, man.
And he used the code.
Yeah.
Is that legal?
Is it a hack? Is it even correct to call it a hack? That's the question, right? I don't know. I really don't know. What is the covenant? When you bought a DAO token, what did you buy into? And so I can tell you what Slockit put on their web pages. They said, blah, 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 here's how it works, which is approximately what I explained here. But the true implementation of the contract, the sole contract, is the bytecode. And then the bytecode gave rise to this. So now what is the law, right? So then now we're in a world of hurt. But let's move on. I want to cover the basic problems. They're kind of fun. So here's my stance. If this thing hadn't been hacked the obvious dumb way, it would have been hacked the more clever ways. And I want to show you the more clever hacks. And they have everything to do with economics, game theory, distributed systems, all these kinds of issues that are really, really interesting. And so we had like a group that was full of hubris, and they were an easy target. But I really don't know how to build DAO 2.0. Now, what might you want out of DAO 2.0? How do you want it to be constructed? Well, a good thing to strive for is you want truthful mechanisms. You want people to have no incentive to lie about what they think. If I think that Luba is a bad manufacturer of T-shirts, I should vote no. If I think she's a great manufacturer of T-shirts, I should vote yes. And that's it, right? There should be I shouldn't be strategic. I shouldn't be like, I'd like to vote yes, but if I don't do it right now, then I'm better off if I da-da-da. That's a world of complications and difficulties. So the current mechanisms are neither truthful, I mean, they force strategic behavior with unknown equilibria and lead to terrible, terrible outcomes. I want to illustrate some of these issues, maybe focusing on the biggest ones. And this is probably the worst one of all, and I think something that every single So anybody who's doing any kind of liquid democracy and so forth should be aware of. This entire thing, the thing that got us down this path was this problem. This is the affirmative bias problem. The reason why I thought, hey, the DAO is an easy target, really easy to exploit, very gullible, is this. And what is this? So suppose there's a proposal in front of us, and there's a group of us. So some people are going to be supremely optimistic, okay? So they're going to be like, well, you've met these types, right? Oh, Elon Musk is going to deliver, an amazing thing. No matter what he does, he can't fail. Rah, 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 electric vehicles, this and that. Like they love everything and everything. So they see great value in this proposal. I'm going to call these people positive expected value. So Luba has a proposal, and I'm the fanboy. And I'm like, yeah, she's going to be great, da, da, da. Okay, so that's the positive expected value. And then, of course, there are the opposite types who are like, well, maybe Luba is a fantastic distributed systems researcher, but maybe when it comes to T-shirts, she probably can't be trusted with T-shirts. Right? So these are people who expect the proposal to have negative expected value. And we'll have a mix of these things. And it's well known when people are auctioning like oil fields and so forth. Typically, these things are overpriced because the bids are bid up by these positive expected value people, right? So there are very, very interesting episodes in other fields where, the positive expected value people dominate the conversation. In the DAO, we have a similar situation. The positive expected value people have an incentive to speak up, right? I'm like the big fanboy. I'm like, yeah, we're going to go to the moon. Yeah, give her all the money. And I will vote yes right now. I see no reason to not vote yes. I think this is going to make money. Let's put all of our chits down on whatever it was. I kind of lost track of my analogy. Was it we were doing T-shirts? Let's go full in with T-shirts. And so I would feel no reticence. But the negative expected value people aren't like that. They're like, well, here I am. I'm like a bit more sort of a measured kind of guy now. I'm like, well, I think she's going to fail with this T-shirt episode. If I vote no, I'm in for life, right? I'm stuck. So I shouldn't really vote on this issue unless I'm pretty sure that the negative voters will win. Well, how do I know how many negative voters there are? I have no idea, because all the other negative voters are similarly sitting it out on the fences. There might be apathetic people who are not voting. There are negative EV people who are also not voting. All I can see on the blockchain, all that this mechanism elicits, are the positive votes. So there will be a bunch of positive votes, and the negative people will have to stand back and be like, guys, I think we're going to get jacked here, but I don't want to vote no and get stuck and get taken along with all these optimistic people who are just getting carried on by euphoria. Yes, V.
From wisdom of the crowd, we know that the crowd has to be diverse.
Yeah.
And in case of the DAO, I think here you have like positive people with positive expectancy and negative expected value. But the crowd is, let's say, Ethereum users. It's not.
The crowd is going to be, let's suppose it's going to be a nice normal distribution around some expected value. A reasonable thing to say is this is going to bring us 3% over 3 years, right? So that's the midpoint. There will be the positive people and the negative people. All the positives will want to vote. And the negatives will be like, no, we don't want to vote unless we are sure that we are going to win the vote. And the entire point of voting is to elicit the crowd's thoughts. And so they are not participating in that mechanism to elicit thoughts.
If you don't vote, you have no skin in the game?
If you don't vote, you could always split.
So the only reason to vote no is to try to save the positive people from themselves?
And your own, you are committed. If you like the DAO idea and you want to remain in the DAO, the reason to vote no is to make sure that the fund is managed correctly, doesn't fund a bad investment.
So it is your money in a way?
It is, yeah, you're steering your own money. Splitting is going to be a painful episode for you, right? So you don't want your funds tied up for 34 days. You won't be able to do anything with them. What if Ethereum crashes? You can't even sell a dime of that money. Yeah?
Can't you make a smart contract that will vote only if there are enough no votes? Like
That's interesting. You could. And then you'd have a different game, right? What that's going to yield a different. But that seems like a smart way to maybe establish thresholds, right? Yeah, like a
Once
provisional
you get
vote.
that, you can just allow people voting no, and that.
Yeah. Clearly, some ideas for DAO 2.0 are emerging. Make sure that they write correct code because we don't want them getting hacked again. Yes, this is Sergey, right? Okay.
Couldn't this pretty easily be solved with the commit reveal scheme?
A commit reveal scheme. Maybe yes. Yes. Commit reveal would help this.
Vote
And then reveal.
several votes.
Yeah, that can help. Yeah. Okay. So, second issue, stalking. So this got mentioned before. So what can happen? Suppose I want out. I decided that this is actually a bad outcome, that this DAO thing is going to hell in a handbasket. I want my money out. I proposed myself as a curator. That got rejected. I created my own child DAO. I am now the owner of my child DAO. And now what can happen is my child DAO has that money collection phase. And somebody, evil, like Itai over here, could jump into my child DAO and become the majority holder in my child DAO, keeping me from taking my money out ever. Now, he can't take out my money because he's not the curator. If he comes in and says, in Gun's child DAO, I would like to propose blah, that all the money comes to me, I will, as the sole curator, I will reject all of his proposals. But as the majority shareholder, he can reject all of my proposals to get my money out. Now we have a Mexican standoff. Now what's my next response? Well, I can again split from my own child to create a grandchild DAO, but he's going to follow me forever. There is no end to this. So, and if he really wanted to persist at it, we'd spend the rest of our lives, trying to get my money out, trying every 34 days, and Itai just kind of mucking with me, being a real pain for me. And complete, the only way this ends is, we have a heart-to-heart, and I say, Itai, I'll give you half my money, just let me out so I can get the other half. So this is clearly a blackmail mechanism. It's absolutely horribly designed. Okay.
Where does this 53% come from?
That comes from the majority, the required quorum. So the required quorum for any decision is 53%.
Maybe for completeness, why do you even need a child DAO? Why have this mechanism of being able to split the DAO into small?
Yeah, I had that question on a slide before, right? So why do you need it? You don't need it. I think they added all of this mechanism to push back on people who might want to exit. Yeah.
If someone stops you, wouldn't you be able to put up more than the 53% and then take his money?
Yeah, you could do that. You could go somewhere and take a lot of cash out and pour it into your DAO to allow you to take the money out. But then they can respond with putting even more money, and you've got a standoff. Yeah, this is an escalator. Yeah, that's true. Exactly. It is a risk to stalk someone. It turned out that the person who did the stalking was the hacker. He's got zero-cost coins. He doesn't care. And he stalked everybody. Every single person who wanted to go out, the hacker went in with his stolen fund.
What did he do eventually with the people he stalked?
Nothing. He let them be. Yeah. He did not grief them. He just kind of stopped.
So it went down to the grandchild level and that's it? Or?
It went to the child level. He stalked them into the children. I don't know if any grandchildren were formed. There might be. But then the DAO got frozen and got undone. Yeah.
So in that case, how is the white hacker who managed to also do the DAO managed to avoid being faulted?
They did not. They did not. So the white hat hackers did a whole bunch of things that ended up moving the money to a child DAO, and I don't think they did anything as I remember.
Prevent him from actually getting the money out. That's what you said.
So the white hackers put all the money into the child DAO, and if I remember correctly, it's been some time, but I'm pretty sure that I just thought about this. It was June when this was happening, and I thought we're going to spend this whole stupid summer people stalking each other forever and ever, and there is no real reason for it to end. But as I also recall, the hacker did not pursue any of the children created after a particular date. I think he got a little spooked about law enforcement following him at the network level. And he wasn't really as aggressive as he could have been. But he could have been much more aggressive. Okay, so let me actually mention a few other things that can happen. There are these ambush attacks. So because the negative expectation voter is a disincentive to vote, then here's the kind of scenario you can have. You kind of have the voting period. The negative expectancy people are kind of like they're taking it easy. They're not voting. The positive expectation value people could coordinate their actions, vote only at the last minute, and then carry the proposal to completion without giving a chance to the negative EV people to react. So there is an easy fix for this, which is as votes come in, then extend the voting period. Right? So that's actually a fairly reasonable thing to do. Or commit reveal schemes could work as well. Huh?
Based on the amount of stake, or
If
you could just trickle down.
you could trickle down and keep it forever, so you don't want to do that. I think the right way to do this is if the disposition of the vote flips, then you give it extra time. If we were going towards a yes, but we went to a no, then we should give it time, and especially vice versa. A couple of people who were courageous, they voted negatively, and then suddenly at the last minute, a whole bunch of positive votes came by, then we should give it some time so that negative people can now vote. I was kind of sitting on the sidelines to not get trapped, and now I'm going to come in full force if I'm given a chance. Okay. There are token raids which have to do with moving the price of DAO tokens. Okay, so you can use an ambush attack and so forth. That's a separate. It affects the price of tokens. There is this notion of extra balances. I mentioned this before. Every time you split, you leave behind the extra balance field. So the accounting in this contract was really interesting and did not obey any mechanism that makes sense. So you already know that there is the fund, there is the rewards, there is the extra balance. So 3 different areas where the money is split. So if you split from the DAO, you take your portion of the fund with you, but you don't take the extra balances with you. That gets left behind. And that was, actually it's substantial money, right? It's $27 million in today's terms. Back then it would have been $5 million. So this money would have been left behind by people splitting. And if the attacker can scare them away, he gets to have a lot of that money. Let's see. Okay. So this is a big issue. Okay. Suppose we are at Andreessen Horowitz. Suppose the 3 of us are general partners at Andreessen Horowitz. We collect some money, right? We make decisions on what to fund, and we are on the same side of the table as the 3 of us. So that's easy in human terms, right? But on the blockchain, you never know who's where. So it could easily be the case that, here I am, I appear to be a nice guy, I'm hanging out on this side of the table, and I'm also on this other side of the table with a proposal in my hand. And I'm voting very much yes on my own proposals. So this is really a big problem. So if there ever is a 53% of the, if somebody owns 53% of the DAO, then they get to control 100% of the coins. And they could come before the DAO with different dumb proposals to get the money out. And you can say, no, the curators will come in. And the curators, if they ever see somebody asking for 100% of the coins, the curators will reject that proposal. Okay, well then I won't have a single proposal that asks for 100%. I'll have 10 proposals, each sounding reasonable, each asking for 10%. Does that make sense? And I could empty this out all day long. So if I could borrow money and go in full force, then I would own the DAO, right? 53% of the, so you just borrow Ether from somebody who has a lot. You come in, you establish this, you now control all of the DAO, You take the money out, it's now gone. And this is a really hard problem. I don't know of any easy way to defend against it. This is a really sort of Soros-level attack, right? You just come in full force with huge amounts of money, you make some cash, you move on. Let's see, there's the reward dilution issue. The DAO issues these reward tokens that I mentioned, which are kind of like, they're kind of like dividends I mentioned, but they don't follow any accounting principle, especially they don't follow you into grandchildren. So if you get stalked and you have to go into a grandchild, then you're giving up substantial money. Remember, you gave up some money in the extra balance field. You also give up some money in terms of dividends. Right. So there are some race conditions. This one is the unblock me business. I didn't mention unblock. Let's maybe skip this. This is too esoteric. This is, I think, the last one I want to mention. This is an exciting one. So here is what you could do. This is the concurrent proposal trap. So in fact, we saw this happen. This actually did happen. As soon as the DAO became operational, people, and I suspect these were Slockit folks, started putting up proposals for $0 that are sure to get people riled up. So one of them was, I believe in God, or something like that. And you know, you've been on the internet, this is a topic that people are really religious about, right? So the religious folks are like, oh, blah, and then there's the atheist movement who are like, oh, well, you know, how dare you, blah, blah, blah. So no matter how you vote, it seems like an easy thing to vote one way or another, right? It's like an emotional thing you click yes on. That was the longest, it had the longest voting period. So now the moment you press yes or no to that proposal, you're stuck in the DAO for 2 weeks, okay? And so now what could you do? I put up one of these incendiary things, you know, I believe in God or not, whatever. I trap a bunch of you into the DAO for 2 weeks, just by virtue of getting you upset. Then I come before the DAO with a very short proposal, very short term, and your money is in the DAO, you can't get out because you voted on the dumb proposal. And then I use one of the other tricks to push forward my other low value proposal, the proposal that takes money out. All right, and finally, I think this is mostly for you. There is one final issue. This is a really big issue. How many people here have thought about, like, how many people have heard of Condorcet voting? Okay, so let me quickly talk about this. This thing can, okay. Everything about the DAO assumes that the proposals are independent of each other. Okay, so, you know, so there's proposal A in front of the DAO, you vote yes or no on it. Then there's proposal B, you vote yes or no on it, as if the two of them have absolutely nothing to do with each other. But this is real life, and these are, like, the proposals come from a very rich universe. And it could well be that you want to express a more interesting preference. You want to say something like, I vote yes on A only if we also vote yes on B. The two of them together are synergistic. We want them together. But otherwise, I don't want either. Okay? And so you can easily get into situations where the DAO, where people are like, so, I mean, there are matrices that you could imagine, preference matrices, where A and B go well together, and I want to vote yes on those. And then B and C go well together, and you might want to vote yes on B and C. And then C and D might go well together, and you want to vote on yes on C and D. And so forth. You can have circular structures of this kind that mean that we are looking at a set of proposals, any one of which is positive, a pair of them would be great. But there's some circularity, and we are then unable to make a decision, even though making any decision would be positive. Did that make sense? I can draw the... No, it didn't. Yes or no? It's easy to draw the matrix, but imagine like A and B. A alone gives us $1. A and B together gives us $100. Okay? And then Luba thinks B and C together gives us $100. B alone gives us 1. C alone gives us 1. And C and D is the same way. And let's say D and A are the same way. Okay? So now I have a circle. And now my best interest is to vote yes on A and B, and no on C and D. same for her, and same for him. So now we all voted no on each other's proposals. Of the three of us, 2 people voted no on every proposal, and I don't know, I think 2 people voted yes on every proposal. So we're going to be at an impasse. We're not going to be able to make a decision, even though there were all good options on the table. So here, if the proposals are not independent, then there is really no way to express that preference that you want to have 2 things voted. Instead, what you have to do is you have to strategically vote yes on the things you like and no on the things you don't like, and that gives rise to very, very bad outcomes. Okay, so that's really it. What did we learn? It was a fantastic experiment. It was a huge success in teaching us stuff. The value of program verification, I think, is something that the Ethereum community learned very, very quickly. So there's a lot of demand. This was pre-ICOs, right? So the DAO would have been a funding vehicle for projects that later on turned to issue their own tokens. Had the DAO succeeded, we would have been funding those projects out of the DAO. There are lots of big issues in Solidity. Solidity is a very complicated programming language, very much like JavaScript, very hard to write secure code in. And the DAO is a hot mess in every respect. It has all these game theoretic problems with it, in addition to the one Solidity reentrancy bug that it already had. Yes?
How does the story end? Who gets what at the end?
Of the DAO? What do you mean? Oh, what happened with the DAO?
Yeah,
Okay.
Who gets what money and who walks away with it?
Okay, I'll make it quick. So I got woken up. This guy stole $53 million. Had he stolen maybe 20 million, I think he would have gotten away with it. People would have been like, keep it, we'll go this way, you go that way. But 53 million was a lot. It was a substantial percentage of all outstanding Ether, and that was perceived to be a threat later on when Ethereum switches to proof of stake. There was this one hacker out there, he would have controlled a substantial portion of Ether from that point onwards, and people were like, this is too much. So the idea got floated that this hack should be undone. And this created an enormous amount of controversy. I will walk you through it. Okay, so a lot of people in the Bitcoin community are very much of this code is law man type mentality, right? So they're going after quasi-illegal use cases. In the Ethereum community, it was different. And they really wanted this world computer. They are not really so much catering to, people who are doing gambling and this and that. So then there started a discussion on whether or not the DAO hack should be undone. So I personally thought that the DAO hack should be undone for 2 reasons, my own personal reasons. Are we being recorded? Am I going to be? We are being recorded, are we?
There will be a shit show.
You are being recorded, yeah.
Okay. No, it's all good. I'll tell you what I thought. So, okay. I think everybody agreed that if the bug had been in the system, in the EVM, it should be undone, right? Because the system implementers, imagine that they misimplement the add opcode. Everybody wanted to have an addition, but it adds badly, so we should undo it. That would have been no problem. But the bug here was all in the implementation of this particular contract, right? It was in that reentrancy code. So now there's a question. Do you undo it? Do you not undo it? From my perspective, yes, the bug was in that code. Yes, the bug was in a piece of code written by a user. Yes, it wasn't in a piece of code written by a system implementer. But why did this user make this error? Why was the reentrancy bug there? It's because the system implementers failed to convey how their system ought to be used. They failed to document properly this reentrancy feature that they added to their system. And even Vitalik looked at this code and should have known better, and he missed it. Everybody else missed it. So therefore, it seemed to me that the system had failed the users. Even though the bug was not in the system, it was the system's fault. I didn't make this announcement publicly because there were all sorts of legal issues being fought as well, and I didn't want to point fingers at my friends and saying, these guys actually kind of screwed up a little bit, which they kind of did a little bit. So that was one of the main reasons why I was I was pro-fork. Many other people were pro-fork. The other arguments cited were the amount of money that the hacker ends up owning and the threat he poses to the proof-of-stake system. So he's already a somewhat malicious guy. We know that now. And he's going to participate in proof-of-stake, and he's going to start acting in a Byzantine fashion. That's a threat. And so it was seen as an existential threat for POS, and I saw it as a mistake in the system, even though the code itself was located in user code. And the third one is, of course, philosophical. Like, do you believe in code as law? Or, there's this philosophical issue. Are we slaves to an algorithmic master? Are we trying to overthrow some kind of a fiat mechanism and replace it with another mechanism that is even worse than fiat? At least with corruptible politicians, you have some chance of corrupting them. But instead now you have this algorithmic reality where whatever crappy code gets put there, we are like beholden to for life. That was a big problem. And also, I kind of sort of fast forwarded the whole episode with spy versus spy. And there would be like months and months and months of pain dealing with this hacker. So anyhow, I was pro-fork, and the Ethereum community, so it's kind of fun actually, this part of the story. The Ethereum community also came out very strongly in favor of forking. Okay, so hard fork. And one of the concerns was, is this setting a precedent? And the counter argument to that was, no, we are not the Supreme Court. If we undo this one hack, it doesn't mean we're going to undo every other hack. You can say, we're going to do it just once, and that's because we're in the early stages of Ethereum. It's like the first 9 months of Ethereum. We're not going to do this again, ever. And it's possible. Like, it's possible to have restraint. So, and we've seen that restraint played out. There have been many other hacks. None of them have been undone. And ultimately, the community decided that they want to revert. And the way they wanted to revert was as follows. They wanted to freeze all transactions relating to the DAO. That is a soft fork. Okay, so the initial soft fork is, if a miner sees a transaction that relates to the DAO, don't put that transaction in the block. And later, that would buy us time. Then later, we would have a new contract to replace the DAO. So, and they got the code ready for the miners to implement the soft freezing fork. And I was sitting at home, and so many months before, there was this high school student who had written to me, and I had written back. We had a few exchanges, and I was encouraging, and I was like, apply to Cornell. He's like, I really love smart contracts. I was like, apply to Cornell. We can do stuff. So he wrote to me again. This is the summer, and he was like, hey, we exchanged messages back in September. I'm this high school student. I have now been admitted to Cornell. I'm really excited, and I looked at the soft fork code, but isn't it opening up a ginormous security hole? And you can see the security hole. So in normal Ethereum, if there's a transaction, and it consumes resources, it pays gas. But in this case, I could come up with very complicated transactions that the miners take, and they execute and execute and execute. And at the very end, that transaction invokes the DAO. And at that point, the miner has to toss it out, and having spent a lot of effort on executing that transaction, but unable to put it into a block, unable to collect the gas. So that was an enormous denial of service vector. So I wrote this blog post, and that really totally spooked the markets, and they were worth 1 billion, they went down to 900 million. And anyway, I felt really bad, but Vitalik was really nice. He was like, no, we preserved 900M. We didn't lose 100M. And that was the only thing that I've ever written with a high school student. He's a brilliant guy now. He's currently a junior at Cornell. So that didn't happen. That fast-forwarded us to the hard fork, and they replaced the DAO contract with a withdrawal contract. Just hard fix. And so what happened was, everybody who put money in got their money back out as Ether. So it was as if the DAO thing never took place. And that's the only hard fork that has ever taken place in Ethereum today. That's the only contentious hard fork. The only long-lasting. There have been other changes to Ethereum, of course, also to Ethereum Classic. So after the fork, so when the fork happened, we weren't really sure what was going to happen. The old discarded blockchain kind of died out. And nobody wanted to do anything. We were sitting around a table like this, and Vitalik suddenly looked up and said, "Hey, I got a message from a Bitcoin Core developer that I'm not going to name." And this person was trying to buy Vitalik's old coins on the old chain. And that is not a friendly thing to do. That was our first indication that some people wanted to revive this chain. And they were Bitcoin people. And so that gave rise to this thing called Ethereum Classic, where on that chain, the DAO hacker lives on. The DAO was never undone. And there were some genuine people from Ethereum who really believed in this code as law mantra. And they switched, but I would estimate them to be a very, very small group. And so Ethereum Classic established a value of its own. These systems are impossible to kill off, in essence. And it's been a tiny fraction of Ethereum's value ever since then. So and so they say code is law, but they have made many changes to their own client. So they will tell you, well, we never modified our blockchain. Well, it doesn't matter what's on the blockchain. What matters is what's on the blockchain and its interpretation. And you're changing the interpreter, even though you're not changing the blockchain itself. That's a ridiculous. I mean, those two things are isomorphic. So we knew you will have to make some changes to the client. There you did. In fact, within 6 months, they had to make a hard fork themselves for fixing another problem that they had. So anyhow, so that's the story of the DAO. It was really funny in many different ways, and it's now everybody understands the value of program verification. Yes. No, absolutely not. Yeah, you on the spot print money. We recently had Bitcoin fork into Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash. We had Bitcoin Cash fork into Bitcoin Cash and Bitcoin Satoshi's Vision. All of those things are valued on external markets socially. Oh, yeah, that's a fascinating question. Often the forks actually untap greater value than is Gestalt, yeah? It grows. So the sum is greater than the original, often. Because one group of people can go in one direction and become fruitful and attract people like them, and then the other group can go in this other direction and attract other people and build, and the sum of two communities will have more people and more money in it than if they were forced to live together. It's interesting. Yes, Itai. Really? I remember the sum being larger than the initial one. Oh, I see, okay. Yeah.
Continuing the sunny day thinking, you probably get the discussion a lot, but what do you think would happen if the DAO wasn't hacked and was actually still existing now? How would the space look?
Oh, the space would be very different. We wouldn't have had ICOs. We would have had projects turn into proposals before the DAO. And they probably would have raised less money per project because, just by virtue of the mechanism. I think the pool that would have been available would have been smaller. We would not have had the ICO craze. Assuming everything went well, we would see other funds, other competitors to the DAO with more focused efforts emerge. I don't know, and then I don't know what happens after that. It's fascinating. Yes. Am I running out of time? Like I've been going for a long time. No. It's. Oh, I don't know. There are real experts in the room. When they get their DAO code together, that's when it goes. Yeah, I'm not working on this. This is a fascinating topic. So yeah, we're looking forward to somebody solving these hard questions.
We had 2 developers yesterday from DAO who are not here today.
Oh, okay.
I think the more interesting question is, do you think a DAO will actually make sense? Like, do you think there is a point in which we can construct something in which this ideal dream can be somewhat realized?
I am supremely pessimistic that you can combine pseudonymous identities with proper, strategy-proof, truthful operation. It's just very, very hard. But maybe, or maybe you will actually need identity. Once identity solutions are on, this is a different world. So, but at the moment, like the DAO style stuff, loosey-goosey, everybody's anonymous, that's just a recipe for disaster. Yes, Zvi?
First of all, you didn't mention that SEC wrote a paper that the DAO was a security and
Yeah.
And now the question, from my opinion, the DAO looks like Rube Goldbergian machine,
Of course.
purposely designed with enormous complexity. ICOs in comparison with the DAO are very simple.
Uh-huh.
So, do you think that instead of designing the DAO 2.0, it's better to design simpler mechanisms for funding specific projects?
I'm not sure. So, ICOs themselves are a complicated mess on their own. So, yes, the things that they sell you are tokens. But what does that token correspond to? Well, then you have to read this really crappy white paper, and that's a different world of hurt. So I'm not sure what the optimal strategy is. I think we're going to see the emergence of DAO-like entities. Funds are a good idea. Investment funds are a good idea. So, but how they're going to operate, how they're going to keep themselves free of conflict, I really don't know. It seems hard without identity.
So we'll do one more question.
Sure.
Why was the argument about hackers proof of stake was considered serious when the total amount of Ether is unlimited and Ethereum can dilute its share however it likes it?
Well, no, it's not unlimited. It's they had a roadmap on when they were planning to go to proof of stake.
Many roadmaps.
But back then, we did not have the benefit of knowing what happened, right? So they were looking forward to, in about a year, they wanted to switch to a proof of stake back then. And the inflation rate is capped at 2%. So it wasn't unlimited Ether.
So hacker would have got how many percent of the total?
I forget now. I mentioned it's...
Order of 10 or?
He would have had 3 million Ether then. So on the order of 10-ish is what I think it is. And
Not
10...
so much, it's not 50, it's not even 50.
It's not a direct threat to a quorum per se, but given the mechanisms they were thinking of at the time, he would have had immense influence on which transactions are chosen. So, great, thank you very much.